Hi everyone. A couple of you guys had asked a couple of questions about the sculpt that I'm working on as far as the workflow. And while I'm not going to time lapse this entire thing, just because it's pretty involved, and I'm still kind of exploring with it, but I do want to time lapse a few later on. I did want to jump in and answer a couple specifically because it's kind of a workflow that I've been working out that I find to be pretty cool and pretty nice, that works really well with the dynamic topology, and that really wasn't really possible until we got dynamic topology. And in this case, it applies to creating these small frills here, or like these kind of membranes on this creature from the design done by the wonderful people at CreatureBox. And so what I want to do here is just show you how I went in and created this. So this is not done by any means, but if you've ever worked with multi-resolution or anything like that, you know that doing small things like this, or very thin areas, is a little obnoxious, actually. It just tends to be a little finicky and pretty hard to get right. And so what I wanted to try with dynamic topology, though, worked out really well. So what I've done here is, first off, let me just hide this, because you'll notice that this is the original sculpt with these pieces, which these kind of long, thin pieces, I extruded out with the snake hook brush. And then what I've done is I've gone in and modeled these things here just as basic planes, essentially, where I just modeled them to fit on the long kind of tendrils, or, well, I don't know what you would call these, but these, the long spines of sorts. And I've just basically extruded along that and then filled it in. And then I've gone in and simply added in a solidify modifier and a subsurf modifier to add some thickness to it. Not very much thickness. You'll notice that it's really, really thin. And then what I'm doing to go ahead and merge these together, because you notice this doesn't look very natural. I mean, it works, but it's not real natural and doesn't quite fit in. So what I've done here then on this one, because this is the exact same workflow, is I take this, and with it selected, you'll notice I've turned off outline selected just because it speeds up things a little bit. But let's just go ahead and turn it back on for a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply these modifiers one by one: the mirror, the subsurf, and the solidify. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to select my high resolution creature model here that I'm sculpting on. And what I want to do is I'm going to add a Boolean modifier to it. So Boolean right here. And then I'm going to switch the operation over to difference and then choose these frills, which are, the object is plane 006. Notice I haven't named anything yet. Plane 006, I'm going to add that. This may take just a little bit since this mesh is starting to get more and more complex. So we'll just let that run for a moment. And it's still spinning, still spinning. There we go. Okay. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take this one here and I'm going to hide that. And it looks like it didn't quite, oh, excuse me, I actually used the wrong mode. I don't want operation. I can go and hide that. I don't want difference. I actually want to join them together, because you notice right now it's actually just basically cut those out. So rather than difference, I want union, because I want it to actually join the two together. It's not just going to grab the intersecting pieces or the difference. It's actually going to join them together to make them one object. And this will take just a little while again as it goes through and calculates everything. This would probably be better to do when I'm not quite as far along on the sculpt, just because it'd be a little bit faster, but that's all right. Okay, so now it's actually joined them together, and you can't really tell just because they still look completely separate, but what you can't see here is that these are actually now joined together. And if I go and apply my Boolean modifier, and let me just now, as soon as this applies, I will maximize this view, and then we can jump right in and start sculpting again with the dynamic topology to then get a nice kind of smooth transition over this to give it a much more organic feeling. And we'll let this go a little bit more. There we go. Okay, and I'm just going to maximize my view here. Let's go right into sculpt mode, which I've just set up a hotkey as Control Shift or Alt Shift Tab. And then I'm going to go over and enable dynamic topology, which you can also do with Control D, and I'll enable it. I don't care about losing vertex colors and things like that. And let it enable. And this is definitely quite a bit slower because my mesh is starting to get pretty complex and it's getting a little bit heavy. So you can see up here I've got, what is that, 591,000 triangles here. but it still actually sculpts pretty nicely. Basically what happens is it sculpts really nicely, but then just, every few steps or so, it'll give me a little bit of lag. Not a big deal, but just, enough to be a little annoying. So now I'm just going to switch to the smooth brush. And now if you notice, I'll just kind of sculpt right in here just a little bit, and you can see that's all merged together. So now I can just bring these right in and start combining them. I might switch to my clay strips, and I can kind of sculpt on top of that a little bit more. I might raise the detail a little bit by Shift D, just raise it up. And then I can go in here. And you notice I do have, when I do this, there's two very important things for working with these very thin objects. Or actually one very important thing. Number one is front faces only, because otherwise, since this is so thin, you're actually going to be impacting the back and the front at the same time. We only want to be impacting the side that we're drawing on, and in this case, the front. And then to help optimize things even further while I'm doing this, because right now I'm not worried about detail. Instead, I'm only really concerned at this stage with combining the pieces. Then I'm going to go in, and as soon as this recovers here in a moment, this machine is starting to get a little bit old. I'm working on a 27-inch iMac from a few years ago. And here we go. We have collapse short edges enabled. This way, any edges that are below the minimum length or below the detail length right here will then be removed and combined into other edges. And so this will actually remove actual detail from your model, but it's also really good because then it's going to basically help optimize your model as you go along, and any areas that you have, say like overlapping edges or weird kind of creases and such, it'll kind of remove those to then help get a nice smooth result. So then I just go in, and you can already start to see how just adding that little bit of an edge right around those starts to give a much more natural feeling to it, and allows me to get a really nice shape that otherwise would have been pretty difficult to do. And the reason I like doing this with the Booleans, with the dynamic topology, is that if I were to do this all in one go with a really complex base mesh, these frills, since they're so large and also really thin, to manipulate these or to manipulate their shape later down the road would actually be far more difficult with the sculpting tools. This is a shape that's much easier to manipulate with just simple polys than with sculpting, because otherwise you're going to start to get all kinds of weird holes and things like that, and it's really just going to be kind of a pain. You're going to have a really hard time getting these smooth flowing forms. And so by first going in and sculpting in these long protrusions or antennae or whatever they are, using the snake hook brush, then going in and just quickly polymodeling in the frills and combining them with the Booleans gives me a really nice clean workflow and allows me to get those really thin areas with very, very little trouble. So I think that it seems to me to work really, really well, and really kind of shows off the advantages of the dynamic topology very, very well. So with that, since this is running a bit slow, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Just wanted to give you a little bit of insight there into these smaller pieces, since a couple of people had asked about that. So with that, happy sculpting.